So I'm going to attempt to talk through what I did as a 40-minute video yesterday and then realized I didn't have any sound. But anyway, so let's talk theming. The boys are working on a theme right now, but look through what the theme I made yesterday is. So I made a new theme called Slide Theme. And Slide Theme is currently up in LRN Web Components. It's under Elements, and then it's under HAXcms Elements, lib. There we go. And so it is there's the dev theme, and there's the, I don't know what the hell is it called, the slide theme. Yeah, okay. So I boiled down and abstracted the theming and state capabilities of the theme to a mixin because Nikki wouldn't shut up about how awesome mixins are. And then much like all things, I just need to eventually stop saying, yeah, okay, and then just do it. And then I'll go, wow, look at this new thing I discovered. This is amazing. So that I just steal credit away from Nikki entirely. Don't worry, I did it to Potter for years. So the beauty of not so much the mix-in, but just the way that the state is currently handled in the theme is, so if we look at the dev theme, and then I'll call up the dev theme instance. Where the hell did my test go? Oh, I renamed my test space to lecture 100. So it's of course very confusing for me now. It's because I'm used to it saying test. So this is the slide theme. So you can click down on the bottom, and all it's doing is, you see it's updating the URL. And I mean, don't worry, web components aren't fast. Let's just make sure that that's clear. Web components aren't fast, and you couldn't possibly do any of this. And all that we're building, gang, is just a cute little text editor. But aside from that, so this is the slide theme, right? And it's got the title. I can switch it over to the dev theme. The dev theme I also improved.
So like people teaching from their open course content could both view it as course content and as lecture slides, is what you're saying. Certain people.
Yeah. So part of that is I was thinking, well, what if I add in, and I haven't done this yet, but what if I add in like core support to HAXcms to like let you switch themes? I know, Mike, that was something that you had asked about at one point. And the state, the router rather, seems to want to support that, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to bring up is, how we might want to handle layouts in the router. So I think the two options right now are you can switch the entire theme, or do we want to be able to switch layout components inside each theme? So.
Yeah, so I feel like what we'll need to do is, you guys can show your ODL theme or whatever as well, but I feel like we'll need the ODL theme to be pretty far along and then be able to kind of abstract back from that and say like, okay, how could we have, done this on a per page basis or whatever? Like that weird Vaden issue we were having, Potter, where it had the million messages, is a result of that aspect of it, the swapping out as to what element to show. So what you had implemented it, and it just said like, hey, update this, and so it was just like injecting nonsense into itself in the DOM, which it did. It was then PO'd about because then it would try to remove them. So I just basically inject them into like a fake temporary area with fake elements. But yeah, that would be something we definitely need to explore still. But so this is the new developer theme, and all it does is it has next and previous buttons. You can unset state, and so it's kind of just a really good testbed way of seeing how far the state management has come in the platform in general. There we go. So now the next button's disabled, previous, and it's ripping through loading these files dynamically. Then there's a listing here, and I have to, there we go, get that to show up. And then I can click and, you know, forcibly set state. So what the theme actually ends up looking like, because of the mixin, is there's a reference to the mixin, and then there's some, you know, generic CSS. One of the only requirements for doing our themes is this. So you need edit mode needs to be reflected, and it is automatically in the mixin. And then you need to be able to say, basically have some wrapping stuff around the slot tag like this. And the reason for that is that effectively what HAXcms is doing when it bootstraps the theme is it takes this area and then it goes more or less like that. It's basically injecting dynamically the HAX editor there if there's the capability to do it.
So just real quick, whenever we're creating a theme, this step would be use the HAXcms theme mixin, and then somewhere in the shadow DOM, we need to put a div with an ID of content container, div with an ID of slot, and then a slot inside that.
Yep.
Okay.
Because effectively what it'll do then is it is going to target these things. So the slot.
Can I abstract stuff more?
How are you abstracting further than that? There's literally no logic in this.
Just taking the parts that people would have to remember to do and make them their own things.
So there's nothing to remember to have to do currently for a basic theme.
What?
Like you can't abstract this CSS snippet. I mean, I guess you could put it in
shared style.
Yeah, but I don't really know that that would do anything though, because you'd still then have to include the shared styles for it. I mean, you could, so that you don't have to think about that. The simple blog kind of F's with this pattern, so I'll show simple blog too, because that gets in the weeds more of how to actually implement it. But I think the key thing with where it is with the mixin is the only logic that is in the dev theme is this, which is this item tapped function.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see I've set a listener on the list to say, hey, whenever you tap on anything, do something. But if you look at what it's doing, it's literally just printing a debug statement. So the dev theme, all of the logic is abstracted into the mixin itself, down to you have like certain kind of magic functions, if you will. But so like this, the previous and next buttons, so they just call on click previous page, on click next page. Then they have a disabled like handler, which are some awesome little things that Potter wrote for the outline player. So I just abstracted those. So I think you guys messed with it yesterday, I know, but what I'm liking with it thus far in its current iteration is we're pretty much forming like a theme layer and like a theme API, because previous page, that's pretty damn generic functionality. I mean, like every theme we're going to have, if it has like a next button or a connotation of the previous thing, it's the same logic, so that it'll end up calling it that way. So comparing this with the slide theme, which is, slightly more real, slide theme has just that little slot area. It has the mixin. I do mix in simple color or include simple colors and HAX shared styles, which just does some minor spacing, but those aren't required. Although I guess simple colors more or less is required. But so here we go. There's the title, that position. There's that slot part, which in this case, the slot is just the whole stinking, the whole stinking page. And then, where is it? Okay, so in this one, I did mess with the state a little bit to add some more logic, which then is fun if you dig into the mixin, you just know what to extend. I didn't actually, now I'll probably be, one of you will tell me I'm silly, but I was not aware you could actually do this. I just kind of guessed you could do this. So I needed to more or less jump into when previous page was hit and do something else. And I didn't want to just rewrite the previous page functionality. So I can do super.previous page. I don't know that I even need to pass the event to it. And then in this case, I do a minus minus on the counter, which is how you end up getting visually where's the slide player? That's how you end up getting this number, so that when I click, it goes down and up. There is a minor issue where it's not set, and the initial state is not set correctly in it. And I can get into if that's the theme or if that's actually an issue with the system. But Potter, what I thought was interesting about this is, especially if it's event driven, right? Like next page is called when someone clicks on something. Doesn't this feel a lot like hooks? Like if you've got a mix in and then you're just calling the super of the exact same thing, it's like I'm hooking into that event.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
So I know it's not the same, but I mean, it ends up feeling rather similar.
One thing would be, so would previous page in this example is like specific to the theme. You're not just changing the state, right? You're not just making the next child or the next sibling the active item. You're doing like other stuff.
Yeah, so in the mix-in, it is doing a state change.
Okay, all right.
So if I go to let me go to the wiring for it. So if I look at previous page, which is going to look exactly like your logic from outline player, it calls this stop previous page. You see previous page. Hey, what direction? Previous, and it handles all the state management in that operation. Now, you could, if you really, if you wanted to, like if I undid that, right, and then I manually was handling the state management there, I could. So as a wildly different example, because simple blog was, of course, not simple, as I'm finding with all the elements that Nikki makes that are prefix simple, that I'm also doing is simple. They're not.
The complexity on the back is supposed to make the other stuff on the front simple.
Yeah, I know.
Either that or...
That's the fun of those element names. So let's see. Okay, so I need post, and I need source. There we go. Okay. So this is simple blog, which let's load up simple blog. The other fun thing that is, going to get lost on me immediately is the fact that I'm even doing any of this and not thinking about state or anything. Like the state is getting so flipping good. See, like, hey, I have all the state management just like I did before, and now I've got a blog. So why this needed to implement the theming layer differently, though, is as you see, there's no real slot here. Right, so the initial page actually just shows a whole bunch of posts, and then when I select one, I'm effectively changing, and that could be where we get into a refactor at some point, Potter, like mentioned with the letting the router make that change as far as the element that something is presented in. But to see what is going on there, where is it? Okay, so it's iron pages. And the first page in Iron Pages is 0, and page 0 is the header, which just has that big image and has the listing. And then in listing, whenever you tap on something, that effectively hits a link, and when the link changes, selected pages gets changed, which, there we go. So location change. So this is the, implementing the state management stuff directly. So, I don't, for the life of me, understand how to read this stuff, Potter, as far as saying it as a sentence. But my understanding of the way MobX works with this is, hey, when this element's attached, automatically run and keep updating the manifest equal to this anytime this has changed, and active item ID equal to this anytime this has changed, and anytime auto run, which means a change happened of some kind, then I need you to run this function, which is location changed. Is that even remotely what's going on there?
Yep. So auto run is the like very, very magic function in MobX where it will figure out what properties on the store you're trying to get at. And then from there, it'll take a look at, well, router manifest is a complex object, so I need to do this type of mutation observer on it to make sure that you're getting update. The only thing that I would say is it's possible that we would want to put each of these statements into their own auto run function so that because anytime that router manifest changes, it's going to also update active item and location, even though those haven't changed yet.
So the auto run sets a series of auto run objects? Because I saw that you had it as individuals, and I obviously didn't understand enough of what it did. So like what I don't get is how the hell does it know to only call this because it's wrapped in this other function?
I don't know if it does know to only call that. I think it will call everything inside of auto run.
Because I mean, if it looked more like this, like how, what I don't understand is how does auto run know that only store.location is the thing influenced here?
Oh yeah, that's the magic part. It grabs, I think what it does is it converts that function inside of it, like stringifies it, and then analyzes what the store object is and what properties on there you're trying to get access to, and then sets up specific mutation observers based on that.
Okay, so you're saying that it should be...
Now, it could be where it's smart enough to even know. It's smart enough where you could put all of those under one auto run function, and it will only execute that specific line in question. So, you know, only update store.router manifest.
I guess the easiest way to test would be leave it this way, and in location change, just console log something.
Exactly.
So.
Yep. Yeah.
So this is fine. Yep. So I'll show you how
and then put those all back to one.
Yeah, I know Nikki has not seen the local theme development of this, so this is perfect segue. So when I was working on their theme, what you get to end up doing is you can still do Polymer serves, and so you go into the site in question, and then you do a Polymer serve, and you have this entry point dist/dev.html, and what that'll do is, I'll take this off the address, it's going to do a Polymer serve, and it has the paths hooked up in such a way that it'll just run here, and then it'll fake the connection credentials so that you get the editing experience. So, I mean, if I go to a page or a post and then I hit, you know, stuff and I hit save, it's not going to do anything because it's just running here, you know, like a little Polymer, like any of our other element testing, you know, would be.
Like a dumb thing.
Yeah. But because of that that entry point thing, I can do this, which I didn't know. This is major credit to Potter because I didn't know this would work, but it will start to time out because Docker is pissing off my file system. That's what I meant to say. But it will adjust there we go. It will load that post correctly, which is a lot more the behavior when you're on like a published site. Like if I go to btopro.com and then I go to one of these posts and it says, no, you're not innovative. And then I hit refresh and it'll just be there. So it lets you emulate what the production level behavior would be without, you know, a backend, which then the advantage being you don't have to compile all this crap, as you're finding with compiling is fun. So then I go to simple blog and I do our normal yarn start so that there's a watch directory running on that. You could sit there and monitor it, I guess, but I won't. and then pull up my console log, hit refresh, and let's see what happens. All right, so stuff ran once. Okay, and then that's with those. I'll get into the disposer thing too, because that's important. All right, and now let's do it where they're all in one block. All right, so I changed state. Change state, it should run once. What are the other manifest, active? I guess it's only running once, dude.
Yeah, then it's very, very smart.
I mean, yeah, seems like it's. Now, I can't manipulate the manifest in the same way, so me document, I did fake this yesterday for some other document dot get element by tag name is a nice one. And then you can do, see, there we go.
What?
So it may be confusing as to what the hell that is doing. But so this is document.getElement by tag name. I select HAXcms site builder, which is the tag that sets up the whole system. And then you have to do 0 because it's an array. And then I can do, from there, you can step into that object just like you could normally. So $.manifest.generate request, which is an iron Ajax. And so that forces the go get the site.json to fire. And by forcing that to fire, it resets the state of the system effectively, is the way that that's happening. So now let's see if we set that back to the three separate disposer ones. And then we'll refresh. See, Nikki, you were having all your fun refreshing items. Oh, there we go. See, that only fired once now. So, okay. So that proves it.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more of a pain, but
I mean,
either way works. It's just like if any one of those functions does anything radical, then you'd want to break it out into its own auto run function.
Yeah. So okay. So that's really good to know that that's the difference there. Then what you can do, or the reason I hold on to these, is that then I call these at the end and on the detached, and effectively that then cleans up all the state associated with them, because it is running, like, if you think of it's running like event listeners more or less. And so that's in the documentation for MobX of, like, if you store this, it's a reference to, and then you can run the function again and it'll kill it so that it's not listening anymore. So why that's important, and you'll see in these detached things here. So let's look at the actual theme wiring. So instead of, this doesn't, because this is a old school Polymer element, right? So this doesn't use a mix-in, partly because it can't. If you implement it directly in the created callback, right, or in, you know, the newer elements, that's your constructor, you do new HAXcms theme wiring. You basically just let it sit there, which just references all the stuff associated with it, but it doesn't wire it up. Then when you call .connect, it's saying, hey, connect this item to HAXcms theme layer. And then this second one is, here's the location of the slot area to hijack. So what that does in HAXcms, if you look at, there's ID equals post, is it's a simple blog post. And so the post, because of the way that that HAXcms works, is all this, if you think like all the state management, all the, hey, go get this file and present its contents, that all happens at the highest level. And so then that content that's going to be set gets passed down into this slot here of whatever the high level tag is. So I'm redirecting that into simple blog post. And then when there's a change noticed via MobX saying, hey, location changed, when location changes, it looks at it and says, am I on the home page? Because if I'm on the home page or a 404 error, like I don't know where to go, then set selected page to 0, which selected page is the iron list of, is it the first series of pages or the second series? So in selected page, there we go, iron pages. So if it's 0, I get the home page. If it's 1, I get the back button, I get the simple blog post, and then I get my slot, which gets passed down into that, which then in simple blog post, whoops, if we look at the, there we go, there's content container, right? So then in simple blog post has that ID content container, slot ID, slot wrapper thing. So that's the way in this theme that even though I'm not, so like if this is the primary element, right? This is my simple hyphen blog element. And then right here, I'm down in another tag that I can still hit edit, and I get the perception of the authoring experience being in the same place. And I say perception because it's not actually in the same place. It's got the content there rendered, and then it's got when you hit edit, it takes what the content is rendered and injects it into HAX, and then injects HAX right in the exact same spot, and then changes that theme variable, which hides the slot content. And so you basically are getting this toggling, but largely you can't notice. Now this won't save in this instance, but if I go back to the actual, there we go, this page, and I hit edit, and I delete that full width image and hit save, you'll see it's there for a second, and then it gets the update triggered behind the scenes and replaces the content. So that's a lot more of the, you know, it does the where is it, the wiring is actually 2 different classes. There's the superclass export, right? This is the wrapper one, and then there's a very generic like theme wiring, like your wiring closet type of thing, which HAXcms theme is implementing the wiring. But if you really wanted to dig in the weeds, you could do that. Most of which is setting up like event listeners, and it's doing the auto run. So the other nice thing, like with the dev theme, is you'll see there's no MobX included. Like I'm not doing anything with state in the dev theme or in the simple blog, or sorry, in the slide theme. But in simple blog, no, that's post, sorry. In simple blog, I am calling into that, right? So we could start to document the state management of the system and the theme layer. And if you're a themer, you don't ever have to get into the state management if you don't want to, right? I mean, if you get into some sophisticated use cases like, you know, the theme Chuck and Potter are building, that's going to be pretty sophisticated. Like you're going to have to dig in and say like, hey, give me the top level menu icons or whatever it is, or items rather. But that you don't necessarily have to do it that way. So that's kind of the state of the state. And then there's the was it .connect I did mention. I'll leave off there. So it's ready, hey, connect, which then wires up the theme to be HAX capable. And then it's really important, and this is mostly just to make sure everybody is always thinking of this. Anytime we attach any events or anything, we need to make sure we detach those events, no matter where they're attached to. Polymer 1 did a lot of that lifecycle stuff automatically, and so now we don't have those training wheels effectively. But without constantly doing like these detach and this disposer thing, what that's netting you is that I can more or less seamlessly switch from my blog to this development theme. And what's happening there is the HAX editing piece that's deep, you know, it's buried within here, is getting ripped out of the DOM. The theme is getting ripped out, and then the new theme is put back in, and all of it's rewired, and then HAX is put back into it, is how that's possible to switch between these themes. Because that shouldn't really be possible. what that's doing without like just completely crapping out the DOM or requiring you to have advanced logic in your element, but it is effectively disconnecting all the wiring that it put in. So it's important that we have all the disconnection handling.
So what we were talking about earlier with how do we want to handle layout? That's what's so interesting, is that it's so easy to switch themes here and maintain the same state that if you're building like a course outline and all of a sudden you want to present like a video in a radically different way than the content is, you could do it in two ways. You could either create an element that changes the layout radically that lives inside your theme, or you could just switch to an entire new theme just for like one page, and then on the next page switch back to the like original content theme. So
yeah, and if you don't have so like if I go to this path and I go to it in a browser,
so
it doesn't
question then,
yeah, go ahead.
if we can switch themes at the page level, is a HAX stack really going to be what themes are? Or do we still see that as a different thing?
I think it's a different but equally useful thing. Because you could, the way the VADN router works is that by default, it's noticing the path change, and then it's supposed to be saying like, and now place this new element here, and that's where everything, it's basically taking an element and swapping it out real fast is what the idea is. And then that element would auto load. So I'd see it more like, I think it would be a different connotation of theme. Like it would be much more like, I'm on this page and this page goes, hey, we're about to drop into a slideshow. And so when you hit the next button in the theme, it switches over to the next page, and that page says, hey, I'm actually supposed to be presented as a slideshow now. Keep state maintained. So I'm on slide 9, but it actually would say 0 in that case or whatever. And then when I get to the end of it, it might say like, click here to continue on to the next lesson. When I hit continue on to the next lesson, it is actually just changing the state to the next page, but that page has said, hey, we use the default theme. And so to the user, it appears that you're like jumping between different places, but really it's not. So I think the stacks connotation will be important still for like, I've got a whole bunch of stuff on this page that I want to drop in and I want it to be laid out, but it's not a fundamental, like layout busting change to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So we can kind of mix the two together, but they're similar.
Well, and maybe the stacks is more like, a content template with content items, as I think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, we could also throw down a stack. I feel like this approach will help it make our stacks easier. So we could throw down a stack, and maybe that stack is a HAXcms play the elements below me like element.
Yeah.
And so the stack really just throws down like a handful of wiring and leverages the fact that it's in HAXcms to correctly present everything.
Yeah, I see stacks as a way for people who really are thinking about content strategy as an opportunity to sort of lock down or model what the content's supposed to be like. And maybe at some point map to the data if they need it to change use.
That would be good. Stacks, I feel, is a good parallel to like a paragraphs notation in Drupal.
Yeah.
Versus the maybe the theme layer switching what the theme is more of like a layout connotation in Drupal, which is the Drupal 8 layouts thing, saying like, this is the rigid structure in place X here and Y there.
Sure.
Are we boring you, Nikki? You're just that tired this time of day. You've already had
apparently. I know. Like this is like all at the end of my coffee. I'm gonna have like a third cup. And
so I got 3 other fun little things. I put in a thumbprint button, and the thumbprint button is now for details of the page you're currently on. And so like this is says things from my father at the top, I can change the location to Chuck Band. And then it'll be like Chuck Rocks. And then I hit update. And the state does get a little goofy, I think. I gotta go back here. Where was that page? There we go. So the top now says Chuck-Band. And down here it says Chuck Rocks, which is the only place you see the title in this theme. But so that allowed me to just kind of like pinprick the details of this page, as opposed to, right, if I hit edit, I'm actually updating the content of the page. So you couldn't update the title before. But what this also represents is the gateway to hell. And so the gateway to hell is, if this form was generated from the backend, which it currently isn't, but let's say that the backend served up JSON schema, which is what happens when I click this. So if I hit settings, this right here just got remote loaded. It doesn't, you can't even tell, it just happens so stinking fast, but it made an AJAX call, and the AJAX call only returned JSON schema. And then it just rendered it through that JSON, that eco-JSON thing. And so why this is the gateway to hell is, if we have the backend say, hey, give me JSON schema and place it here, it would be pretty easy to more or less replace the Drupal fields connotation and content types connotation through this little window. And so if the theme had a connotation of like, you know, brackets active dot metadata dot whatever, or like active item dot fields dot description or dot images or whatever, and the backend more or less sent forward a bunch of fields that allowed you to fill out whatever, and when you hit save, it's going to figure out where to stuff that in the JSON blob. You could start to have the design, or well, that's where it gets, I don't know where the abstraction would be, so I'm kind of pontificating here, but you could have the design say like, hey, this is a blog post, and a blog post needs a header image. And header image is not core to HAXcms. Header image is a specific connotation of this
Just
design.
self-structured content.
Boom! Gateway to hell. But don't worry, this is an adorable little, it's just an adorable little text editor that we have here. So, so then we'd have to get into, are we doing content modeling based on the design? And does that live abstracted from the theme, or is that something else, right? Because I would hate to say, I would hate to be WordPress and be like, all posts have a banner image. And then like a year later, people are like, what, why the hell do a post, I don't need a banner image for this. And I don't know, just ignore that field, right? Like, we don't want to get into that aggressive type of a mindset, but at the same time, it would be really stupid if you made a theme and that theme had a banner field, and then you made another theme and that theme didn't have a banner field, or had a banner field, but it was named something different, right? So it's kind of the...
Couldn't we have like some base pieces and then sort of a custom config area where things could be added that aren't part of the standard?
Yeah, yeah, we would need to, that would certainly be an area that we would really need a whiteboard for this. But
so
yeah,
in the sites.json, under, let's say, metadata, we have something called content types.
yeah, I mean, either that lives in this file, or there's nothing saying we don't have like a, you know, field defs.json, right, as like a completely abstracted supplementary thing. It would take a lot of conversation as to where those lines of delineation are, but the fun design paradigm that comes out of the theme. So if no, I mean, I know those two saw, but I don't know if you saw, Nikki, when I hit settings, it actually says Eberly ODL theme here, even though that's not in HAXcms. So what it took for that to happen is, in the core guts of the system, oh, look at that import. In the core guts of the system, there's a themes.json, which is this little blob. So that's how, when I added slides theme yesterday, I just added this here, which is, here's the element to put down on the DOM, here's the location of that file to load, to lazy load, and here's the title to place there. But then the Eberly one shows up under config. In config.json, there's a themes area. And so we could start to establish this almost like, you know, load a core config JSON file that has the base fields, and those base fields are just like title, right? And like created date, because that's going to always exist. Like whatever those actual things that are core to the JSON outline schema spec are, load those. But then as this, as those field definitions get assembled, more or less mash it up with whatever came from config as well. So that's, and you can see that happening in the dev theme when you're on the there it is, the dev theme when you're on the home page. And so there's, you can do development work on the home page of HAXcms that has the overview board, but it has to load data from the theme config, or sorry, from the config directory and the core directory simultaneously, because I don't have PHP when I'm running in Polymer to mash these two up. So what I do is I fetch the config that's there, and then I fetch the system level config, and then I smash them together into the same variable that would have happened at runtime when PHP was available. So we could basically start doing the same thing for like theme development if we really wanted to. And I don't think with the themes we have currently we'd want to, but with what Chuck and Potter are assembling, I feel like you guys are going to have some pretty brute force type of state management solutions that we'll then be able to abstract later and be like I'll go to it just so we have an example from it. But in site.json, there we go. You guys are leveraging like this, right? So like this is a blog post. It's got the date in there, which you can do. It's got the title, and then it's got that. I mean, you guys are already putting in type data and stuff, like basically doing content modeling in the metadata area, which totally makes sense because then you can do, you know, selections and stuff off of it. But
we could add tags metadata. We could add learning objectives metadata.
Yeah, it's weird because
whatever.
Since this is just JSON, it's potentially so easy to just with like a CLI automate, just make sure that everything with type news also has author and image, and that could be included, you know, just basically like looping through these items and making sure that they all have that information. But yeah, it could be abstracting that to another like content types.json file to make sure that we just basically extend the news type from the content types file.
Yeah, it would be
getting that info.
It would be mostly for like validating the schema.
Yeah,
of those.
right.
And I think it would also be important, and this is like, I'm not telling you to stop doing it this way, like, so just keep doing it the way you're doing it. But like, I could totally see there being like this.
Oh yeah.
Right. And now, you know, and maybe type is right, like a almost establishing like a core aspect to the way we structure the metadata to keep sense of it. Or, you know, if there was like, if banner image was a core field, right, that we almost start to establish these via that metadata file, which is then really similar to nodes, right? Like this is more or less the way Drupal, the way Drupal would do it, right? So I'd be like, oh, well, it's not image, it's images, and then all I'd have to do for that is drop down another layer. Part of this is sort of happening already. Look in PTO Pro file. There we go. In so when you drag and drop upload an image via the UI, when it uploads the file, it also creates a files area under metadata, and it rips all of the metadata associated with that file there. Now that's not used yet, it's not visualized in any way, but you could easily then, we could start to make, like HAXcms hyphen image player, and the image player knows to just read off the metadata of the post you're on and put it there, right? So that then, Nikki, you want like a slideshow, right? Or like it's for the student blog, or not blogs, whatever they be, the portfolio stuff, right?
The theme would just say, I see a bunch of images, and in this theme, we're doing it as a gallery.
Yeah, and then that could either be at the theme layer, or we tell the students, hey, how do you want to present this gallery or whatever, their exhibition? And they go, oh, well, I'm going to do 3 galleries, and the galleries are going to be from these specific, artifacts that I made, and it just figures out how to present them all. And then when they add, right, so they go, oh, well, how do I add stuff? Well, I go to that post, and I drag and drop the image. It updates this list, but now my exhibition space automatically gets this new item in it. So this stuff is still pretty darn infancy state, but it's good to at least bear in mind that we should start thinking about this fields connotation, because we'll quickly get to it with, like I see what you guys are doing with the ODL site, where it's like, hey, here's the post by these different authors. I mean, that's bread and butter content type of stuff to say, even just to have a connotation of author, that you can then keep repurposing what an author is. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Let me take that back to where it was, because I don't want to mess with it, even though I'm not using this one. But all right, last thing is I made a new element just for funsies. It was actually for the slide player. So I'm going to delete me. And it's because I saw Hibbets has this markdown slide player. And I think what he's doing is awesome. I think where we're headed is like, we're meeting the use case that he's describing needing all this technology for. And so I'm sure right now, especially because it's not really approachable to most people, that it's like, yeah, but this works. That I'm hoping we can get him to switch at some point. But so now there's a markdown element. And the markdown element goofs up at first, but if I write markdown, and the fun thing here, for historical purposes with Potter, is we made an element that did what this now just naturally does. And that took a day. And all it could do was just this 2-panel relationship. And we did it for the studio, so people could write markdown if they wanted to. And this wiring just does it automatically. But the fun thing where it's even more powerful there. So this remote loaded Paul Hibbett's readme.md off of his GitHub repo, and now I've just got it here. Now I can't edit it, but I think that's a potentially interesting design paradigm, similar to Nikki. Didn't you have this concept of like portals or something? Like,
yeah, wormholes.
Like wormholes, yeah.
Because one of the things that in learning design we had were people were using SSIs for little snippets of things that they wanted to change in one place and, automatically update everywhere. So it might be some little blurb about how to submit a certain type of assignment, and every time they describe that assignment, they wanted that blurb there. Or it could have been some weird disclaimer that worked across every single course or in every single syllabus, and they wanted to be able to force change it.
So this doesn't exactly do that, but I think it could start to establish some people to think that way that otherwise would be like, this is content and I wrote it one place. Like, yeah, or you could, funnel it in from a remote source pretty easily. I think that element, which is MD-block, could also be a good bridge to getting off Gitbook, because you could initially pump all that material through something like this to just play it without needing like an actual converter. Now, I mean, I know Potter, the conversion stuff of converting Markdown and ripping it as HTML is not a big deal, but just thinking as far as like, if you have faculty members working in Gitbook presently, if you could generate the site.json automatically, and then every link just pointed to their content, like as far as those Markdown files, even just for an initial presentation of like, look, this isn't actually, you know, moved over, but when you update over there, it does it here or something, right? To even just try to get across the idea of the permanence of the material is still intact, like this still lives one place, but it could pull in legacy stuff, because I'm sure there's going to be some rather advanced use cases where people wrote, you know, 100 pages of Markdown or whatever, and be like, look, I want to just display that like I had it, and then I'll clean this up later.
Now, I did write a Gitbook to JSON outline schema module, but I don't know if that still works or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would still
be not a module, but a node module.
That would still be useful. Oh, look, I blew up above the upper threshold of that, so clearly there's a fun little state issue there. So that's all I got. The state management of this thing is getting pretty stinking awesome, I must say. I've now moved my HAXcms, I've moved Hacks the Web and my personal blog and a test bed area over to this, where they're all published from here by me clicking the publishing button. And so all three of them are there. We're also rocking some pretty high scores on Lighthouse. They're not flawless, but they're pretty high, because now HAXcms pumps out progressive web apps that are completely offline capable, which is a BFD. Let's see, there's the score. So this is the latest. I refactored the way that we append data to the page one last time. This is a pretty ridiculous score for zero config, and for not using Webpack. As you know, Mickey's in Webpack hell, but one of the advantages of Webpack theoretically is that it bundles everything so small in that you only get the pieces that you absolutely need. Well, our process uses Polymer build, which intentionally keeps all the pieces separate, but all the little pieces are small. So the only areas we get dinged on with this is like 100, right there. It's 199 resources. And it's because we keep all of them separate, right? So like Simple Picker is still simplepicker.js. But we can actually get even better scores once I have Fusco fix this. He's not fixing it, right? It's caching policy on the assets as they come from a CDN. And so it's kind of a precursor to the CDN we would want to exist here that currently doesn't, but web component stuff, edu/CDN, there we go. Right, so like that's the official copy of the HAXcms editor builder. So Webpack is gonna crush those 199 assets into like 5 files, and so you get higher scores in that regard. However, you lose the flexibility, as I'm sure you're finding, Nikki, where you have to reference everything, pull it all together, smash it into a few bundles, and then it sits out there. So it's hyper specific to what your context is versus our approach. This stuff lives out there. Anybody could reference any of those assets, and it just assembles it on the fly and still gets really high scores. So not to pick on the React bubble as we were last night, Nikki, but I feel like that's the fundamental difference in worldview is smash everything together.
I think that is a highly redacted conversation.
I love Silicon Valley. So yeah, that's
I'm gonna get going here pretty soon. You want me to show what Chuck and I worked on? While it's still up and running here. Back to Zoom. Share.
I'm gonna run around and find all those auto things now.
Yeah. So with Brian's help, he migrated all of Chuck's once V0 spec web components over to V1 spec with ES6. And this is what we have so far. Yesterday, what we did is before this navigation didn't work, so we hooked up the routing. So now if you click team, we'll throw you over to the team page. News will take you over to the news page.
Oh shit, dude.
Yeah, dude. And you click on a news item and it loads the news page.
Nice.
So yeah, we did that in like, once we got everything installed, we did that in like an hour. And much like you were just showing with the iron pages, oh, come on. Sorry.
Unbelievable.
Recent, hacks. That's not it. What's it called? ODL hacks theme. Thank you. Bear with me. Okay. So this is this blog. Let's go to ODL hacks theme. So we're setting this up as a hex theme by using that that mixin, which makes it really easy, which gives us access to the store. Or actually, that doesn't give us access to the store. We just import the store in this line. But just like Brian was showing, I'm listening for any changes on the location object in the store. Whenever that changes, I'm evaluating it. So for the high level paths, we're just doing a basic switch statement that just makes it switch the page there. So it just changes an internal property called selected page. And whenever the selected page property changes, it updates the iron page. So that's just what Brian was doing also. And then for anything deeper than that, so like let's say blog posts. So for blog posts, we have a tag called HAXtheme that we want to render the content through. So I just do a starts with function on the path name. And I say if it starts with blog post / then make it be rendered through page 4, which is the HAXtheme blog. And so the HAXtheme blog top, thank you. HAXtheme blog also gets access to the store. And so it sets up some auto run disposers too. So it listens to the router manifest. Whenever the router manifest changes, it gets whatever the active item is in the store. It loops through the manifest to find it, and it sets that as an internal property called active item. So in our shadow DOM here, we're just using active item.title, active item.metadata.image, and so on and so forth. So that makes it so if you go to news, click on documentation tool, this loads with the appropriate image that was defined in sites JSON. HAXcms goes to the markdown file that's inside of the HAXcms site and loads the correct content. So if I click back and I go to accessibility tips, it's a different page. So yeah, don't need Drupal anymore.
Don't need anything.
Yeah.
It's I can't get over how disgustingly fast this stuff is.
Yeah.
Like it feels wrong.
Yeah.
Shipping a single file that has the entire index of everything that will be needed. But the recent, that's all the lazy loading. Like every page now lazy loads all the assets that are included on it.
Yeah.
And even the theme, like the theme gets lazy loaded at runtime, and like that stuff just jacked the performance through the roof.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't feel right. I don't.
So that's one of the questions that I was going to ask that we ran into yesterday that you previously explained, is how to make it so that each of these have their own ability to have HAXcms injected into it. And what you said was moving this from this location to right inside of the blog post itself, I think, is what you described.
Yeah, and so you'll get to test something fun.
Okay.
There is so you're using the superclass, right? In the, on the highest level element, right? You're using the mixin?
Yeah.
Okay. There is a property. There's a property called content container. It's uppercase container. That is an object reference.
Okay.
So if you look in the actual wiring, there's the objects, which is this dot content container. And if you look in the connected callback, if it's not set, it automatically sets it to this dot shadow root query selector content container, like the ID content container.
Gotcha.
And then there's an observer on it, which is the only thing that Polymer is currently required to do in this mixin, which says if the content container changes, then that is the actual thing that triggers the act of doing the wiring connection. Does that make sense? So in the old,
Chuck says yes. So
in the Polymer 1 style elements, I went and manually said like HAX wiring dot connect, and I had to supply where it was connecting. Yeah. In the mixin, there's no connect. It's just whenever something updates the content container object, the observer on that goes, oh, I have a thing that's worth connecting to.
Gotcha.
So you could define that dynamically, and there's logic in that that disconnects where that is and reconnects it, so that you could switch internal to the same theme and it would reappend HAX to the new location.
Gotcha.
Now I haven't tested that. But
so that could be the method that we support multiple regions.
Yes, yeah, I guess. Yeah, it would be like dynamically. I wonder what the performance hit would be on something like that, because it is effectively ripping HAX out of the DOM and putting it next to that new location. But yeah, I mean, I didn't think of it. That's a good point.
So would I be hitting that, would I be calling that property in my hex theme blog?
So I think it would be whenever, so in each of the posts, right? So like there's HAX theme blog, like do you have a slot in there?
Yeah.
Okay. So you would have it set up and you would need to wrap the slot with that ID slot. So you'd have to have this little thing, which now of course Nikki's going to say, yeah, this is why the CSS being in its own thing is going to be so useful. However, you still have to put the DOM, you still have to put it in the DOM.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got that there. So you would, everything that would be editable, you would have to have that in.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then go to the the theme, the higher level one. All right.
This is the highest level.
Yeah, yeah, this one. And so whenever selected page would change, you would need to, I pasted it in the thing. It's this .content uppercase container, but it would have to be off of the wiring, which I believe there's a, you should have access to this what's content container off of? Oh no, it would be off of your element itself. Yeah, yeah. So your element is going to have access to this .content container.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you point that to the new object, right? So you would do this .content container equals, and then I don't know what the home element is, right? If you had an ID for the home element, you could then, you could do like this home element dot. You could do something like that. I don't know if this is going to work, by the way. I think this is slightly theoretical, but I did do testing on this on Tuesday.
Actually, let's test out blog.
Yeah, you're going to need to do it on 2 different ones and see if you can get it to jump between them.
Okay. And that's clicked in there. Wow.
What?
I think it worked.
How? I mean, I don't see the editing tools, so.
Yeah.
Well, the editing tools weren't there anyway.
They were at one point, not since
Yeah.
the version.
Yeah.
Oh,
But I mean, if I take this out, then the content's going to disappear. No, it's not.
Oh, who's there? Put it.
Oh, because there's a slot there.
Yeah. Oh.
I see.
Is there an error or anything?
It's a lot of YouTube errors.
Yeah, man, they send you all kind of crap, don't they?
It's hard to, I don't think so.
Now the sidebar.
I don't know. What the hell?
Keep going back. Keep right there.
Should I call that directly? Shouldn't need to, but. Or more or less that. Like, that's effectively what's happening.
From the top level.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be your blog container. There you go. Like a blog or something.
I don't know. Like I said, I didn't see the editing tools yesterday either.
Is it going on dist dev?
Yeah. Let's check out this.
There should be a whole bunch of stuff towards the bottom that, yeah, has all that stuff faked. Yeah, I don't know. If you send me the theme, I can take a look at it real quick. But that'll effectively be the pattern, right? Is you'll give IDs to those and then jump between them. Yeah.
I mean, in my mind, this is where, like, this is nice, but this is what the Baden router could replace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we'd have to, yeah. But I mean, hard coding that for now is not the end of the world. I feel like we will run into that paradigm a bunch, though.
Yeah. But yeah, Chuck and I were pretty excited yesterday once we realized that this is all working. So.
It might be because you don't have a slot on the top level element.
Yeah.
Might be something like where it has to connect on the initial pass through, and I'm not understanding enough of why that is, but
so like does it have to have the whole
that slot targeting thing? Yeah, that content container thing. Yeah, don't put that in there. Just put it like at the bottom of the page or something.
So, but yeah, it's really cool. We really like it. Also, WCFactory got a new command. I don't know that we've published this yet, but if you're...
It's in master, but it's not.
Okay.
I don't have a release for it yet, though. You're right. Should do that.
If you're working across multiple elements and you need to run like watches in those elements, sometimes it can be a pain seeding into all of those elements. So we have WCFactory Operation, and you choose your factory, and then we have this nice autocomplete so that you can search like accent card that you want to work on. Choose that, and then you can choose what script inside of the scripts object that's located inside the accent cards package.json, which one you would like to run. You can run dev, and then it'll just kick off that operation. So it's a little bit more handy.
You are so lazy. It's my favorite thing about this team, the amount of epic laziness.
And did you see Storybook 5's coming out?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm just now playing with it. Fuck that shit. Stop moving my cheese.
3 to 4 wasn't that big a difference. Like,
Okay.
for example, none of our stuff worked in 3, and then when I upgraded to 4, more of it worked.
I see.
Cool. So we got anybody else have any show and tell? Show and tell?
I can show some rich text stuff. Okay, can you see the desktop?
Yep.
Alrighty. So I've been playing with making rich text editor, as we know. It's got some, still got some work to do, but it's to replace what we're doing. And I'm trying to make it as customizable as possible. We've got the heading levels in here. What's nice is, format, you can see the, if I highlight that as bold, the button updates its style. If I move off of it, bold disappears. Back on, this is bold. I've added some additional widgets like the symbol picker. And so I can replace all of that with a symbol if I wanted, or just insert a new symbol here. I made, this is an example implementation of, you define your rich text editor and whether or not you want it sticky. And sticky means that if I had a lot of content and I rolled, it would just stick at the top. And then this is the function for setting which editable regions we have available. I have an easier implementation where all you have to do is have something called rich text editor content, and just the fact that everything's wrapped in that says, hey, call an editor. If you don't specify an editor, I'm calling the default configured editor. And then I have custom configuration, which is where we can start saying, here are some of the buttons I want to define on mine. And I changed my heading drop down so that they look like tags instead of words. I can define this little customizable bar based on screen size and hide things. And you'll notice I extended picker to be an emoji picker just to see how well I can extend the things that I have in here. And I want to show what's going on underneath that.
Which, for the recording and for Chuck, why are both of us simultaneously working on text editors?
Because we're going to meet in the middle. This one's needed for table editor. And I'm playing with how much we can extend with it. You're playing with how to make the navigation a little more seamless between things and make it disappear and get it out of the way when people don't need to see it.
Yes, so this will be for the areas where HAX is completely overkill, but yet you still need a CK editor-esque editing environment. And we could potentially wipe out the way I'm doing text operations and drop this in.
Yep.
I mean, probably. I would prefer to do that.
I like it. It looks neat. It looks real clean.
Cool. So the stuff that I'm actually doing in it is where the really, really fun kick-ass shit is. Can we see this pretty well? Do I need to blow it up? All right, here's what's going on in here. So we have a default config sitting in there as a property in the editor, but any of that can be overridden. So if you look at the custom config example, I am just overriding the default config here. What's nice is in these config objects, I can set things, I can say, here are my buttons. I actually want a button group, so I can set them off in little group pieces. I'm specifying the order based on the order that they're in. And I can say, all right, I just want the default rich text editor button that does some kind of a command. And I can just call it from here and not even write a component for it and say, here's the label for the button, here's the icon I want, and when somebody hits that button, you're firing the command save. If there's no command in the, the HTML5 editable stuff, it'll just fire it as an event. I mean, it'll fire all of them as an event, but it will try to exec a command if there's a command associated with it. So that's how I can do, so this one is actually firing the default undo command, but here I might define a save command somewhere and listen for it. Now for more complex buttons like the picker, part of this is the rich text editor picker type. And by default, it just takes some items. They might be, you know, block level items and adds them to the menu. Here's the label, here's the tag I want to wrap because it's a block level item, and boom, I have a drop down. If I really want to override a button and make it do something different from default button behavior, well, the picker is just actually extending the button mix-in. And to make the symbol picker, which does a little more complex shit than the heading picker, it's extending the picker piece so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. And things that are unique to the symbol picker are in here. So I'm loading a file with a list of all of the symbols and then running them through and setting the options that the picker has to basically load all of those different symbol icons.
Where are the symbols coming from again? Could you scroll back up to that part?
There's a data file here. And it has a bunch of different HTML codes for symbols. So it's loading that file.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, where is it loading that file?
Where is it loading as in?
Because I thought it looked like you were doing that ES bridge thing.
Oh, I am, yeah.
So you don't need to do that for that.
I do not?
No, you could export that variable from that JS file and then just import it at the top of the document and just have access to it.
Well, then I will do that.
That'd make timing a little bit cleaner and a little bit less.
I will make sure I do that because I'm also doing it in the emoji picker.
That's what I figured.
But yeah, but yeah, so basically this is now if somebody wanted to make a button that picks something else entirely, you can just extend the picker that comes with it, and you can define your own component. It doesn't even have to live with any of this. It could, you know, it could live somewhere else, and you know, you just call it on the page. And the fact that your config file mentions it, it's going to say, hey, look for this, throw this into the picker, or throw this into the editor. And so you can, you know, extend off of this. The next thing that I want to do is create a button that extends, that accepts fields. And that way you could define a button that has a modal that asks you for things and then stuff into a page. And then at that point, I might be ready to join it with what you're doing. And then I have to use it in the table editor. But I liked this model of doing things because it would be much, you know, more extensible if somebody could just say, hey, I just need a button that fires an event versus I need a highly specified button and I'm going to write my own component, but I don't have to reinvent the wheel because I could just extend. And this is why the mix-ins are my crack. Because it like this and, you know, build off of something and only change what's different. So yeah, and I'm tinkering with the Storybook stuff, but I think that can be for next week.
Nice. I love this team.